Welcome to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, and today we are on our 15th in-depth character review where we are looking at IG-88, a super highly requested character from you guys for a very long time, and this week we are going to do it because it is Bounty Hunters week where we went ahead and looked at Boba Fett last time. And speaking of Boba Fett, let's go ahead and pull up the Hall of Fame and see where we placed him. In our last review, we looked at Boba Fett and we placed him and his brand new rework in the Grand Master category, one of the best free-to-play characters in the game that you can get quite easily, and he is very useful. So how will IG-88 fare against his chief rival Boba Fett? Well, stay tuned, my friends, and you will find out. But of course, let's go ahead and talk about the history of the character because IG-88 has a very unique one that not many know about. The IG-88 line of droids were designed by HoloWin Laboratories, and they were derived from the IG-86 Sentinel droids that were greatly utilized during the Clone Wars. The IG-88 line consisted of 4 droids, which were IG-88 A, B, C, and D, and they turned on their creators by assassinating them. Out of the 4 droids, IG-88B, the one we are currently reviewing today, was the one designated to be the bounty hunter of the 4 IG-88 droids in order to cover for his master, IG-88A. Now, IG-88A had a grand plan known as the Droid Revolution, and IG-88B's job was to essentially create a diversion or distract the rest of the galaxy from what IG-88A was working on, so it stayed under the covers. And IG-88B is known to be one of Boba Fett's chief rivals due to the fact that he was a deadly bounty hunter himself, known for his deadly aim and pinpoint accuracy. IG-88's notoriety led him to being hired by Darth Vader to locate the Millennium Falcon, and he attempted to do so by placing trackers on all the bounty hunter ships. Now, Boba Fett was not fooled by this act and allowed IG-88 to follow him to Bespin, where IG-88 met his end and was ultimately left in scraps at Cloud City once Boba was done with him. And in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we see IG-88 carry on his style of bounty hunting, where he adapts to his enemies, and when they are suffering more, he fights even harder. But moving on from this lovely story, let's go ahead and talk about how we unlock this character. And fortunately, this is one of the free-to-play characters you can get through the Arena store. For 400 squad currency, you can go ahead and grab 5 shards of this character, and if you saw my Arena Store 101 video, I recommended the beginning player to get this character as soon as possible because he is a great character from the beginning and to the very end of the game. But not to spoil too much here, let's go ahead and talk about the stats of IG-88 before mods and abilities are considered, because there is a very valuable lesson to learn here, which we will talk about more in a little bit. And I forgot to mention this in our last video, with Jyn Erso and K2SO being in the game, we have officially hit 100 characters in the game. So happy 100 character anniversary here. And to get started, let's go ahead and talk about the pros of IG-88. And it's a rather small list when we look at the raw data. He is number 13 when it comes to maximum basic damage. The average maximum basic damage in this game is 4,239, and IG-88 can be seen with 5,198, which puts him in the top 15%, but just a little hint, this does not consider any abilities beforehand, but let's talk about that later. Next, what about his AOE, his area of effect, or attack on everyone, whatever you guys like to call it? There are 35 characters which have such an ability, and he is number 11. The average AOE damage output is 2,992, and IG-88 does 3,236, which puts him in the top 30% of AOE damage dealers. And the last thing I have on this list for the pros is that he has 15% health steal, which is actually quite useful, seeing how we'll talk about later his health is kind of on the low side, hint hint. But let's go ahead and talk about the average. What is IG-88 okay at? And his list is about the same as the pros, where we see that in maximum damage here, he is number 49. The average maximum damage is 5,409, and 88 is below this at 5,108, which keeps him in the top 15% by the hair of his chinny chin chin. Now let's talk about the speed. How fast is this guy going to be? Will he be able to jump on his foes as early as possible? Well, when we look at the raw data, he is number 41 in speed. The average is 127, or just under 127, I should say, and 88 is right on top of that average at 127, keeping him in the top 50% in the game, and this does not even consider Jawa Engineer or the other leaders, but I keep dropping these hints. Let's just keep moving on before I spoil everything here. Now lastly, the cons list, and holy cow, this looks like Santa's naughty list here. We first see that he is number 95 in health. Yeah, 95 in health, that's kind of crazy. The average is 19,181, and 88 is at 14,154, which puts him in the bottom 5% of the game, so he's kind of the bottom dweller in this category. Maybe protection, can he try to redeem himself here? He's actually kind of worse in this category. For protection, we see his number 99. I think I said there's 100 characters in the game and he's 99. So he's pretty much just better than one other character in the game, with the average being 19,625. 88 is at 11,825. What about armor? Come on, give us something here. And we see that he's not making it either. The average is 227, and 88 is seen with 202 armor, which puts him as number 65. So it's lacking in this defensive department. But that's not all. What about potency? Because we see that potency is very important for him, as we'll talk about soon, and he's very low on this too. He's number 84 in potency. The average is 30%, with IG-88 being at 16%, which puts him in the bottom 20%. But don't worry, I have a remedy, which we will talk about later. And lastly, another offensive front which he is lacking in is armor penetration. Can he pierce through the thick armor of someone like Five, Sunfac, or Old Ben? And the answer is not really. We see that the average armor in this game is 53, and 88 is half of that at 27, which puts him at the bottom 20% here. Alright, so we looked at the numbers, kind of mixed reactions when you just look at the raw data, but when we look at his kit, we see that it involves him applying a large variety of debuffs to control his enemies and ensure that when they are suffering, he presses the attack even harder. So there is a lot of hope, and just wait and see. The basic ability is called Mortal Wound, and not too much is happening here. It deals physical damage to a target enemy with a 60% chance to inflict healing immunity for 2 turns. So not as useful as it used to be before protection was integrated, because healers were very important at one time, believe it or not. But that is not to say that it is 100% useless, because squads that have Palpatine or Wigs, it becomes very useful, because the worst feeling in the world is when Palpatine is at 1% health and he heals himself to 100% instantly, so that healing immunity does come in handy here and there. And this is his highest dealing attack, which does 5,198. Now let's get to the fun stuff, and that is Rapid Fire. This is his AoE ability that deals physical damage to all enemies with a 55% chance to inflict ability block for 1 turn, and a 50% chance to inflict defense down for 2 turns. So yeah, defense down, it's great, don't get me wrong, but the ability block is what makes him shine. When paired up with characters like Jawa Engineer or HK-47, or actually both I should say, he can apply ability block super early in the game. Usually the third person in my particular squad that goes, it usually goes Jawa Engineer first, 86 and 88, a lot of burst damage coming in, and when he's paired up with someone like HK-47, he can usually attack a second time in a row after this. So that's why later on we will talk about how HK-47 is one of the best leaders for IG-88. Now, going on to Resourceful Pursuer, this is his leader ability, and it kind of is a little outdated now. We see it give all allies 20% critical chance, and it inflicts damage over time when they score a critical hit. So definitely not as useful anymore in light of leaders like HK-47 and characters like Boba Fett and Lando. It used to work very well with Darth Vader in the Rancor Raid, because you can just build up those damage over time and throw the Culling Blade. However, with Vader's Zeta leader ability, this totally lapses over what IG-88 had, but it is a pretty decent leader at the very beginning in case you have someone like Darth Vader and you really want to use Darth Vader. Well, IG-88 and Darth Vader, they kind of go well when IG-88's leading in that situation. But in the end game, you will not see IG-88 leading in too many things. Now lastly, the thing that tells the numbers to go away is the adaptive aim algorithm. IG-88 has a plus 45% critical damage and deals 20% more damage for each enemy suffering a negative status effect. and this is what changes the whole story when you just look at the raw data. His basic attack could do somewhere around 20,000, 15,000 damage, even more on a basic critical hit when all 5 enemies have a debuff. And his AoE can do around 15,000 per person, ignoring armor and whatnot, all that fun stuff. And of course, this is even before mods and leader abilities are considered. So this unique ability alone totally changes what the numbers are all about. Yeah, his damage is 5,198 before critical damage and whatnot, but this ability bumps it up to a giant 20-some thousand attack. So very good. So moral of the story is that abilities can take low numbers and make a character very good. So never just trust raw numbers. And that's why we talk about the kit afterwards. Before we get to the subjective part of the review, let's talk about gear, because he seems great now that we talked about the kit, but we need to know how hard is it going to be to gear him up. And luckily he is pretty good in this category. So it's okay. You can go ahead and wipe those nervous sweats away because there's nothing much to worry about here. The average amount of raid gear in this game is 3, and 88 is right on top of that average of 3. He starts needing raid gear at gear 8, so he definitely needs it starting very early, but he needs 2 Mark V fusion furnaces, and he needs 1 Nubian design tech. So those are the 3 pieces he needs, which is about average, as I've mentioned. Getting on the gold gear, this is where it's a little scary, but fortunately most of this gold gear is not needed until gear 11. The average amount of gold gear needed in this game is about 200, and IG-88 needs 440 pieces. He needs gold gear at 10 to get him to 11, but only 1 piece, which is the Mark 8 biotech implant, and he actually needs a lot of them. Once you get to gear 11, he needs quite a few of these. And before we talk too much about purple gear, I just want to address a very valid point someone brought up in my last video. The numbers for purple gear also include what is needed for the raid gear, so don't be as scared when we look at purple gear, because that also includes what you need to get your purple raid gear in the end. So just want to address that before we get too much in detail. The average amount of purple gear in this game is 1,341, and 88 is needing 820 pieces, and this is actually one of the lowest purple requirements. This puts him at 92 out of 100 characters, and his most popular piece, like a lot of other characters, is the Mark 6 hypo syringes. So very low purple gear requirement. You don't have to worry about gold gear that much, and the raid gear is about average. So in this category, he is boding very well. And then blue, green, and white, nothing too crazy. He's pretty much either right above the average or right below the average, so don't worry too much about that. You should be able to come across that stuff fairly easily. Now let's finally get to the part of the review that you are probably most interested in, and that is my opinion and the more subjective part of the review. And we'll also talk about Yoda's checklist and how he fares up on the do or do not list. Now my thoughts on this. IG-88 is the perfect example of how he is not all about the raw data and numbers. He is about the emotion of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes and what the abilities are all about. He is all about being put in action, and in the correct scenario, he can be a very deadly warrior. He is used for so many things in the game, from arena to the raid to the credit heist, training heist, the things that are really important in progressing in the game, which makes him a great bang for your buck character from the very moment you start the game. You want to pick characters that will last you for many things and for a very long time, and IG-88, he fits the bill. When paired with the right characters, he can attack very early with some deadly burst damage and can help you easily control the battlefield with the opening AoE and ability blocking characters like Stormtrooper Han, Palpatine, Boba, TIE Fighter Pilot. And you might be wondering, well, what can I use to counter IG-88, especially if I think I'll be seeing him quite early in the game? And here are a couple things. Cleansers like Rex, they are great because with no debuffs on the field, IG-88 is not taking advantage of his unique ability that changes who he is in a totally different fashion. Burst damage dealers like Wiggs definitely need him because with one burst from Biggs' assist attack, IG-88, he's a goner. No way he is surviving unless he dodges everything coming towards him. And critical hit immunity is a very big one. Things like Shore Trooper, soon to be General Kenobi if people start adapting him. That will be IG-88's death, essentially. If he cannot apply critical damage, he is doing nothing for your squad. One more counter that I thought of is a Rex lead. You guys probably saw my General Kenobi and clones gameplay. Well, droids, they absolutely hate the clones. When Rex is leading, he's feeding tons and tons of turn meter to the full squad when someone like IG-88 is giving them a lot of critical damage attacks. So that's another great counter to someone like IG-88 and droids in general. So I've already mentioned throughout the video who works best with IG-88, but let me just go ahead and quickly summarize who are IG-88's best friends. First off, HK-47, a definite good choice as his leader. Jawa Engineer, you need him 100% if you want a droid squad anyway, so definitely go ahead and get Jawa Engineer. Some other great characters, IG-86, if he calls in 88 for the burst damage, hasta la vista, baby. You are going down, down, down the ring of fire. Other characters, Boba Fett, Lando, characters that promote critical chance, critical damage for scoundrels and bounty hunters, a definite great choice. And then people like Darth Vader or people who promote debuffs are also a great option for IG-88. Now let's go ahead and talk about mods. I'll go ahead and show you some clips of what I have, and just essentially no matter who IG-88's with, make sure that he has critical damage and critical chance as the mod sets, because when he's constantly attacking, you just want to make sure he's turning out as much damage because he is all about getting critical damage bonuses. Primary and secondary mods should be probably speed, critical damage, chance, health, or protection, and I highly recommend, if you can, the plus sign mod towards the very bottom right of your mod. You probably want to get a plus something % potency to make sure that ability block is sticking, but if you don't have potency, critical damage is definitely going to help as well. Also, if you're running a Boba Fett lead, you might want to just toss potency mods all over him. That's kind of iffy one because I prefer having critical damage mods, but the more potency mods he has, him and his fellow bounty hunters will be getting more health. Now, before we get to the Hall of Fame, let's go ahead and talk about the do or do not checklist, where we go ahead and look at many aspects of the game and say if IG-88 will be viable in those categories. So let's go ahead and quickly go through these. For Arena, definite 100% do. He is great. He's been around in Arena for a very long time. Galactic War, go ahead and do that because that's just an extension of Arena, and you'll probably see plenty of gameplay between me and Mobile Gamer where I demonstrate them in Galactic War. Dark Side battles, definitely go for that. Cantina battles, just like Arena, Galactic War, definitely go for that as well. That's a do. Now, mod challenges. Yes, he is one of the best characters for the critical chance mod challenge. So definitely go ahead, get him. Likewise, I forgot to mention this for Boba Fett, but for the heist, once they made him a scoundrel for the heist, I was easily flying through all the challenges for the heist. So please, go and get IG-88. He makes them very easy to do. Ships, he doesn't have a ship as of now, so it's a do not, but maybe they'll add his IG-2000 ship in the future because that is what he piloted in the Star Wars universe. Now for the Rancor Raid, it's kind of up in the air. If you have a droid squad, you can easily get 1 million damage with IG-88 and his droid, so I'll go ahead and put up a picture. So do not by himself, but maybe a do with him and droids, or maybe him with Darth Vader. That might be a decent choice to have. AAT rate, if you haven't seen my videos, go ahead and do it. There are plenty of other videos out there, but definitely do that. He is the master for Phase 2 and Phase 4, and he makes it really easy. I got 3.6 million damage in the Phase 2 of the normal raid, and about 1.4 million as my max in the heroic raid. So he is very useful in the long run and in for the AAT raid. So there you have it, folks. Let's go ahead, pull up the Hall of Fame, and see where IG-88 will land. So far, we see that Boba Fett is the highest ranking bounty hunter, but where are we going to put IG-88? From Grandmaster to Youngling, we are going to place IG-88 as a Master. He is not going to be a Grandmaster because to be a Grandmaster, you have to work in many different lineups no matter what the situation is. And IG-88 is a very specific type of character that needs to work in a very specific lineup. But when in the correct lineup, he is doing amazing damage and many wonders for your squad. So there you have it, folks. This is our second in-depth review for Bounty Hunters Week. We will probably get one more for sure, maybe two if lucky, or if I get some nice gameplay from someone. But stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like, comment down below on what you'd like to see for the next Bounty Hunter review or any character in general. Subscribe, and we will talk again soon. Peace out.